The Vedic period was the period in Indian history during which the Vedas, the oldest scriptures of Hinduism, were composed. During the early part of the Vedic period, the Indo-Aryans settled into northern India, bringing with them their specific religious traditions. The associated culture was initially a tribal, pastoral society centered in the northwestern parts of the Indian subcontinent. It spread after 1200 BCE to the Ganges plain, as it was shaped by increasing settled agriculture, a hierarchy of four social classes, and the emergence of monarchical, state-level polities. The end of the Vedic period witnessed the rise of large, urbanized states as well as of Shramana movements which challenged the Vedic orthodoxy. Around the beginning of the Common Era, the Vedic tradition formed one of the main constituents of the so-called Hindu synthesis. History, origins. The commonly proposed period of earlier Vedic age is dated back to 2nd millennium BCE. After the collapse of the Indus Valley Civilization, which ended circa 1900 BCE, groups of Indo-Aryan peoples migrated into northwestern India and started to inhabit the northern Indus Valley. The Indo-Aryans were a branch of the Indo-Iranians, which originated in the Andronovo culture in the Bactria-Margiana era, in present northern Afghanistan. The roots of this culture go back further to the Sintashta culture, with funeral sacrifices which show close parallels to the sacrificial funeral rites of the Rig Veda. The Indo-Aryans split off around 1800–1600 BCE from the Iranians, whereafter they were defeated and split into two groups by the Iranians, who dominated the central Eurasian steppe zone and chased them to the extremities of central Eurasia. One group were the Indo-Aryans who founded the Mitanni kingdom in northern Syria. The other group were the Vedic people, who were pursued by the Iranians across the Near East to the Levant, across Iran into India. The knowledge about the Aryans comes mostly from the Rig Veda Samhita, which was composed between circa 1500 and 1200 BCE. They brought with them their distinctive religious traditions and practices. The Vedic beliefs and practices of the pre-classical era were closely related to the hypothesized Proto-Indo-European religion, and the Indo-Iranian religion. According to Antony, the Old Indic religion probably emerged among Indo-European immigrants in the contact zone between the Zarafshan River and Iran. It was a syncretic mixture of Old Central Asian and New Indo-European elements, which borrowed distinctive religious beliefs and practices from the Bactria-Euro-Margiana culture. At least 383 non-Indo-European words were borrowed from this culture, including the god Indra and the ritual drink Soma. According to Antony, many of the qualities of Indo-Iranian god of might victory, Verathrana, were transferred to the adopted god Indra, who became the central deity of the developing Old Indic culture. Indra was the subject of 250 hymns, a quarter of the Rig Veda. He was associated more than any other deity with Soma, a stimulant drug probably borrowed from the Bhmac religion. His rise to prominence was a peculiar trait of the Old Indic speakers. Early Vedic period. These migrations may have been accompanied with violent clashes with the people who already inhabited this region. The Rig Veda contains accounts of conflicts between the Aryas and the Tsis and Dasayas. The Rig Veda describes Tsis and Dasayas as people who do not perform sacrifices or obey the commandments of gods. Their speech is described as mritra, which could variously mean soft, uncouth, hostile, scornful or abusive. Other adjectives which describe their physical appearance are subject to many interpretations. However, many modern scholars connect the Tsis and Dasayas to Iranian tribes Dahi and Dayu and believe that Tsis and Dasayas were early Indo-Euro-Aryan immigrants who arrived into the subcontinent before the Vedic Aryans. Internecine military conflicts between the various tribes of Vedic Aryans are also described in the Rig Veda. Most notable of such conflicts was the Battle of Ten Kings, which took place on the banks of the river Parashni. The battle was fought between the tribe Bharatas, led by their chief Sudas, against a confederation of 10 tribes Euro-Parup, Yadu, Chavasha, Anu, Dranayu, Alina, Balanas, Pakthor, Shiva, Vishanin. Bharatas lived around the upper regions of the river Saraswati, while Puris, their western neighbors, lived along the lower regions of Saraswati. The other tribes dwelt north Euro-west of the Bharatas in the region of Punjab. division of the waters of Ravi could have been a reason for the war. The confederation of tribes tried to inundate the Bharatas by opening the embankments of Ravi, yet Sudras emerged victorious in the Battle of 10 Kings. Purukutsa, the chief of Purus, was killed in the battle, and the Bharatas and the Purus merged into a new tribe Kuru after the war. Later Vedic period. After the 12th century BCE, as the Rig Veda had taken its final form, the Vedic society transitioned from semi-Euro-nomadic life to settled agriculture. Vedic culture extended into the western Ganges plain. The Gangetic plains had remained out of bounds to the Vedic tribes because of thick forest cover. After 1000 BCE, the use of iron axes and plows became widespread and the jungles could be cleared with ease. This enabled the Vedic Aryans to settle at the western Gangetic plains. Many of the old tribes coalesced to form larger political units. The Vedic religion was further developed when the Indo-Aryans migrated into the Ganges plain after c. 1100 BCE and became settled farmers, further syncretizing with the native cultures of northern India. However, the development of the Varna system, which created a hierarchy of priests, warriors, and free peasants, ultimately led to the excluding of indigenous peoples by labeling their occupations impure. The Kuru kingdom, the earliest Vedic state, was formed by a super-tribe, which joined several tribes in a new unit. To govern this state, Vedic hymns were collected and transcribed, and new rituals were developed, which formed the now orthodox Svrata rituals. Two key figures in this process of the development of the Kuru state were the king Parikshit and his successor Janamejaya, transforming this realm into the dominant political and cultural power of northern Iron Age India. The most famous of new religious sacrifices that arose in this period was the Ashvamedha. This sacrifice involved setting a consecrated horse free to roam the kingdoms for a year. The horse was followed by a chosen band of warriors. The kingdoms and chiefdoms in which the horse wandered had to pay homage or prepare to battle the king to whom the horse belonged. This sacrifice put considerable pressure on inter-Euro state relations in this era. This period saw also the beginning of the social stratification by the use of Varna, the division of Vedic society in Kshatriya, Brahmins, Vaishya and Shudra. The Kuru kingdom declined after its defeat by the non-Vedic Salva tribe, and the political center of Vedic culture shifted east, into the Panchala kingdom on the Ganges. Later, the kingdom of Vidha emerged as a political center farther to the east, in what is today's southern Nepal and northern Bihar state in India, reaching its prominence under the king Janaka, whose court provided patronage for Brahmin sages and philosophers such as Yajnavalkya and Uddalaka Aruni. Second urbanization. By the 6th century BCE, the political units consolidated into large kingdoms called Mahajanapadas. The process of urbanization had begun in these kingdoms and commerce and travel, even over regions separated by large distances, became easy. Anga, doorstep of modern-day West Bengal, a small kingdom to the east of Magadha, formed the eastern boundary of the Vedic culture. Yadavas expanded towards the south and settled in Mathura. To the south of their kingdom was Vatsa, which was governed from its capital Kaushambi. The Narmada River and parts of northwestern Deccan formed the southern limits. The newly formed states struggled for supremacy and started displaying imperial ambitions. The end of Vedic India is marked by linguistic, cultural and political changes. The grammar of Pawar to the first Ni marks a final apex in the codification of sutra texts, and at the same time the beginning of classical Sanskrit. The invasion of Dariusai of the Indus Valley in the early 6th century BCE marks the beginning of outside influence, continued in the kingdoms of the Indo-Greeks. Meanwhile, within India, the Shramana movements challenged the authority and orthodoxy of Vedic scriptures and ritual. Culture, society. Rig Vedic society was relatively egalitarian in the sense that a distinct hierarchy of socio-Euro-economic classes or castes was absent. However, political hierarchy was determined by rank, where Rajan stood at the top and Dasi at the bottom. The words Brahmana and Kshatriya occur in various family books of the Rig Veda, but they are not associated with the term Varna. The words Vaishya and Shudra are absent. Verses of the Rig Veda, such as 3.44-45, indicate the absence of strict social hierarchy and the existence of social mobility. O Indra, fond of Soma, would you make me the protector of people, or would you make me a king? Would you make me a sage who has drunk Soma? Would you impart to me endless wealth? The Vedic household was patriarchal and patrilineal. The institution of marriage was important, and different types of marriages are Euromonogamy, polygyny and polyandry are mentioned in the Rig Veda. Both women sages and female gods were known to Vedic Aryans. However, hymns attributable to female sages are few, and female gods were not as important as male ones. Women could choose their husbands and could remarry if their husbands died or disappeared. While the wife enjoyed a respectable position, she was subordinate to her husband. People consumed milk, milk products, grains, fruits and vegetables. Meat eating is mentioned, however, cows are labeled anaya. Clothes of cotton, wool and animal skin were worn. Soma and Shura were popular drinks in the Rig Vedic society, of which Soma was sanctified by religion. Flute, lute, harp, cymbals, and drums were the musical instruments played, and a heptatonic scale was used. Dancing, dramas, chariot racing, and gambling were other popular pastimes. The emergence of monarchical states in the later Vedic age led to a distancing of the Rajan from the people and the emergence of a Varna hierarchy. The society was divided into four social groups: Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras. The later Vedic texts fixed social boundaries, roles, status and ritual purity for each of the groups. The Shatapatha Brahmana associates the Brahmana with purity of parentage, good conduct, glory, teaching or protecting people. Kshatriya with strength, fame, ruling, and warfare. Vaishya with material prosperity and production, related activities such as cattle rearing and agriculture. Shudras with the service of the higher Varnas. The effects of Rajasaya sacrifice depended on the Varna of the sacrificer. Rajasaya endowed Brahmana with luster, Kshatriya with valor, Vaishya with procreative power and Shudra with stability. The hierarchy of the top three Varnas is ambiguous in the later Vedic texts. Pankravamsha Brahmana and verse 13.8.3.11 of the Shatapatha Brahmana place Kshatriya over Brahmana and Vaishya, whereas, verse 1.1.4.12 places Brahmana and Vaishya over the Kshatriya and Shudra. The Purusha Sukta visualized the four Varnas as hierarchical, but inter-related parts of an organic whole. Despite the increasing social stratification in the later Vedic times, hymns like Rig Veda 9:112 suggest some amount of social mobility. I am a reciter of hymns, my father a physician, and my mother grinds with stones. We desire to obtain wealth in various actions. Household became an important unit in the later Vedic age. The variety of households of the Rig Vedic era gave way to an idealized household which was headed by a Gradapati. The relations between husband and wife, father and son were hierarchically organized, and the women were relegated to subordinate and docile roles. Polygyny was more common than polyandry, and texts like Tatiriya Samhita indicate taboos around menstruating women. Various professions women took to are mentioned in the later Vedic texts. Women tended to cattle, milked cows, carded wool. Were weavers, dyers, and corn grinders. Women warriors such as Vishvala, who lost a leg in battle, are mentioned. Two female philosophers are mentioned in the Upanishads. Patrick Alival, in his translation of the Upanishads, writes that the fact that these women are introduced without any attempt to justify or to explain how women could be engaged in theological matters suggests the relatively high social and religious position of at least women of some social strata during this period. Political organization. Early Vedic Aryans were organized into tribes rather than kingdoms. The chief of a tribe was called a Rajan. The autonomy of the Rajan was restricted by the tribal councils called Sabha and Samiti. The two bodies were, in part, responsible for the governance of the tribe. The Rajan could not accede to the throne without their approval. The distinction between the two bodies is not clear. Arthur Llewellyn Basham, a noted historian and Indologist, theorizes that Sabha was a meeting of great men in the tribe, whereas Samiti was a meeting of all free tribesmen. Some tribes had no hereditary chiefs and were directly governed by the tribal councils. Rajan had a rudimentary court which was attended by courtiers and chiefs of sets. The main responsibility of the Rajan was to protect the tribe. He was aided by several functionaries, including the Purohita, the Senani, Dutas and Spash. Purohita performed ceremonies and spells for success in war and prosperity in peace. In the later Vedic period, the tribes had consolidated into small kingdoms, which had a capital and a rudimentary administrative system. To aid in governing these new states, the kings and their Brahmin priests arranged Vedic hymns into collections and developed a new set of rituals to strengthen the emerging social hierarchy. The Rajan was seen as the custodian of social order and the protector of Rashtra. Hereditary kingships started emerging and competitions like chariot races, cattle raids, and game of dice, which previously decided who was worthy of becoming a king, became nominal. Rituals in this era exalted the status of the king over his people. He was occasionally referred to as Samrat. Rajan's increasing political power enabled him to gain greater control over the productive resources. The voluntary gift offering became compulsory tribute, however, there was no organized system of taxation. Sabha and Samiti are still mentioned in later Vedic texts, though, with increasing power of king, their influence declined. By the end of the later Vedic age, different kinds of political systems such as monarchical states, oligarchical states, and tribal principalities had emerged in India. Economy in the Rig Vedic period was sustained by a combination of pastoralism and agriculture. There are references, in the Rig Veda, to leveling of field, seed processing, and storage of grains in large jars. War booty was also a major source of wealth. Economic exchanges were conducted by gift-giving, particularly to kings and priests, and barter using cattle as a unit of currency. While gold is mentioned in some hymns, there is no indication of the use of coins. Metallurgy is not mentioned in the Rig Veda, but the word ayars and instruments made from it such as razors, bangles, axes are mentioned. One verse mentions purification of ayars. Some scholars believe that ayars refers to iron and the words stam and kamara refer to Arona welders. However, philological evidence indicates that ayars in the Rig Veda refers only to copper and bronze, while iron or angstrom yama ayars, literally black metal, first is mentioned in the post-Rig Vedic Atharva Veda, and therefore the early Vedic period was a Bronze Age culture whereas the late Vedic period was an Iron Age culture. The transition of Vedic society from semi-Euro-nomadic life to settled agriculture in the later Vedic age led to an increase in trade and competition for resources. Agriculture dominated the economic activity along the Ganges Valley during this period. Agricultural operations grew in complexity and usage of iron implements increased. Crops of wheat, rice, and barley were cultivated. Surplus production helped to support the centralized kingdoms that were emerging at this time. New crafts and occupations such as carpentry, leatherwork, tanning, pottery, astrology, jewelry, dyeing, and winemaking arose. Apart from copper, bronze, and gold, later Vedic texts also mention tin, lead, and silver. Penis in some hymns refers to merchants, in others to stingy people who hid their wealth and did not perform Vedic sacrifices. Some scholars suggest that Penis were Semitic traders, but the evidence for this is slim. Professions of warriors, priests, Katliya farmers, hunters, barbers, vintners and crafts of Karyota making, Kata making, carpentry, metal working, tanning, making of bows, sewing, weaving, making mats of grass and reed are mentioned in the hymns of Rig Veda. Some of these might have needed fuller Euro-time specialists. There are references to boats and oceans. The Book X of the Rig Veda refers to both Eastern and Western oceans. Individual property ownership did not exist and clans as a whole enjoyed rights over lands and herds. Enslavement in the course of war or as a result of non-Euro payment of debt is mentioned. However, slaves worked in households rather than production Euro-related activities. Religion, main article, Historical Vedic religion. The Vedic forms of belief are one of the precursors to modern Hinduism. Texts considered to date to the Vedic period are mainly the four Vedas, but the Brahmanas, Aranyakas and the older Upanishads as well as the oldest shorter sutras are also considered to be Vedic. The Vedas record the liturgy connected with the rituals and sacrifices performed by the 16 or 17 shorter priests and the Purohitas. The Rishis, the composers of the hymns of the Rig Veda, were considered inspired poets and seers. The mode of worship was the performance of sacrifices which included the chanting of Rig Vedic verses, singing of summons and mumbling of sacrificial mantras. Yajna involved sacrifice and sublimation of the Havana Samagri in the fire accompanied by the chanting of the Vedic mantras. The sublime meaning of the word yajna is derived from the Sanskrit verb yaj, which has a threefold meaning of worship of deities, unity and charity. An essential element was the sacrificial fire, the divine Agni, into which oblations were poured, as everything offered into the fire was believed to reach God. People prayed for abundance of rain, cattle, sons, long life and gaining heaven. Vedic people believed in the transmigration of the soul and the payapal tree and cow were sanctified by the time of the Atharva Veda. Many of the concepts of Indian philosophy espoused later like Dharma, Karma etc. trace their root to the Vedas. The main deities of the Vedic pantheon were Indra, Agni, and Soma and some deities of social order such as Maitreya Varuna, Aryaman, Bhaga and Amsa, further nature deities such as Surya, Vayu, Prithivi. Goddesses included Ushas, Prithvi and Aditi. Rivers, especially Saraswati, were also considered goddesses. Deities were not viewed as all-powerful. The relationship between humans and the deity was one of transaction, with Agni taking the role of messenger between the two. Strong traces of a common Indo-Iranian religion remain visible, especially in the Soma cult and the fire worship, both of which are preserved in Zoroastrianism. Ethics in the Vedas are based on the concepts of Satya and Rta. Satya is the principle of integration rooted in the absolute. Whereas, Rta the first shta is the expression of Satya, which regulates and coordinates the operation of the universe and everything within it. Conformity with Rta the first shta would enable progress whereas its violation would lead to punishment. Vedic religion evolved into the Hindu paths of yoga and Vedanta, a religious path considering itself the essence of the Vedas, interpreting the Vedic pantheon as a unitary view of the universe with God seen as immanent and transcendent in the forms of Ishvara and Brahman. These post-Vedic systems of thought, along with later texts like Upanishads, epics, have been fully preserved and form the basis of modern Hinduism. The ritualistic traditions of Vedic religion are preserved in the conservative Shrauta tradition. Literature, main article, Vedas. The reconstruction of the history of Vedic India is based on text internal details, but can be correlated to relevant archaeological details. Linguistically, the Vedic texts could be classified in 5 chronological strata. 1. Rig Vedic text. The Rig Veda is by far the most archaic of the Vedic texts preserved, and it retains many common Indo-Iranian elements, both in language and in content, that are not present in any other Vedic texts. Its time span likely corresponds to the late Harappan culture, Gandhara grave culture and ochre-colored pottery culture. 2. Mantra language texts. This period includes both the mantra and prose language of the Atharva Veda, the Rig Veda Kalani, the Samaveda Samhita, and the mantras of the Yajur Veda. Many of these texts are largely derived from the Rig Veda, but have undergone certain changes, both by linguistic change and by reinterpretation. Conspicuous changes include change of Visva by Zava, and the spread of the Kuru verbal stem. This is the time of the early Iron Age in northwestern India, corresponding to the black and red ware and painted grey ware cultures, and the early Kuru kingdom, dating from circa the 12th to 11th century BCE. 3. Samhita prose texts. This period marks the beginning of the collection and codification of a Vedic canon. An important linguistic change is the complete loss of the injunctive. The Brahmana part of the Black Yajur Veda belongs to this period. Archaeologically, The painted grey ware culture from circa 1000 or 900 BCE corresponds to the Kuru kingdom and the subsequent eastward shift of the political centre from the Kurus to the Panchalas on the Ganges. 4. Brahmana prose texts. The Brahmanas proper of the four Vedas belong to this period, as well as the Aranyakas, the oldest of the Upanishads and the oldest Shruta Sutras. In the East, Vidha is established as the third main political centre of the Vedic period. 5. Sutra language texts. This is the last stratum of Vedic Sanskrit leading up to c. 500 BCE, comprising the bulk of the Shrauta and Grhya sutras, and some Upanishads. See also, History of India, Historical Vedic Religion, Indus Valley Civilization, Vedanga, Notes. References, Citations. Bibliography. Further reading, R. C. Majumdar and A. D. Pusarkar, The History and Culture of the Indian People. Volume I, The Vedic Age. Bombay Bharata Vidya Bhavan 1951, R. C. Majumdar A.L. An Advanced History of India, Macmillan, 1967. Lokmanya Bal Gangadhar Tilak The Arctic Home in the Vedas, Messrs. Tilak Brothers, 1903, External links, Restoration of Vedic Wisdom, Patrizia Norelli Bachelet,